Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if it is your first time here. My name is Jess. This is just a very quick intro clip for this reading vlog, just to quickly explain what it's all about. If you watched my Hello 2022 video, that's a bit of a mouthful, then you'll know that this year I have set myself a little bit of a challenge to try and deal with my mounting TBR. So I had this idea, I'm calling it Smash the TBR, where basically I set myself a prompt or a theme. I choose books that fit that prompt or theme from my TBR, and then I film a reading vlog of my reading experience. So the first one that I set for myself was books with a bird in the title, and I realised that I've already made a little bit of an error because one of the books has a type of bird in the title but not the word bird, but we're just going to roll with it because I've already pulled out the 4 books that loosely fit the theme, and I have ranked them in order of the one that I think I will enjoy the least up to the one that I think I will enjoy the most, and then I will read them in the order from bottom to top. So the one that I think I'll enjoy the least, not to say that I won't enjoy it, but I think of the 4 it's the one I will enjoy the least, if that makes sense. So this will be a reading vlog, so I will very quickly show you the books and then I'll check in with you. I finished my current read yesterday, so raring to go with the first book. So the book that I am starting with is The Gravity of Birds by Tracy Guzman. This is a dual timeline story which is giving me full-on Kate Morton vibes. I actually think Kate Morton has a book which is very, very similar in premise to this one. So our early timeline, it takes place in the 1960s. We're following 2 sisters who have gone with their family to stay in a friend's summer property, and whilst they're there they meet a struggling artist, and then decades later this artist is now a huge success, and a portrait surfaces of the artist and the 2 sisters, but I think something has gone on in the 1960s summer that they all would rather keep buried, so kind of like hidden secrets. There's some kind of drama or secret or something that they don't want to come out. So that is the book that I'm going to start with. Then we have The Yellow Bird Sings by Jennifer Rosner. This was actually a book which was sent to me by the publisher. It's World War II historical fiction set in the 1940s in Poland. So it's about a mother and a daughter who are Jewish and they hide from the advancing Nazi army, and then the mother has to make a decision whether to try and keep her daughter with her and try to keep her safe, or to send her daughter away in order to keep her safe, which sounds like an impossible situation, frankly. It literally says on the front, a mother, a child, an impossible choice. So very much looking forward to picking that one up as well. Then we have the book that we're just gonna allow in, which is The Magpie Society, One for Sorrow by Zoe Sugg and Amy McCulloch. Don't know too much about this. It's a fairly recent addition to my collection. I think it's like dark academia, crime, mystery, thriller. We have a boarding school and a murder. So it says, a student found dead on the beach, a web of unanswered questions, someone ready to strike again. So we have that one, and then the one that I think that I'm going to enjoy the most, as I say, I'm hoping that I'll enjoy all 4, but I did have to put them in some kind of order. We have Birdsong by Sebastian Faulks. This again is World War historical fiction, but it's World War I. So we have a young Englishman who arrives in Amiens in 1910, and weirdly I've never really seen that many people talk about this book. And then I added it to my TBR for the purposes of this video, and then 2 people who I follow on Instagram have recently read it and described it as completely heartbreaking and heart-wrenching and just incredibly moving. So now I'm like, okay, am I actually ready to read that type of book? I don't know, but just funny that yeah, not seen anyone talk about it, and then all of a sudden it popped up twice. So we have that one as well. So they are the 4 books: The Gravity of Birds, The Yellow Bird Sings, The Magpie Society, and Birdsong. So as I say, I'm going to start today with The Gravity of Birds. I'll do a little bit of reading and then I will update you on my initial thoughts. morning. I wanted to do a really quick reading update. I'm just on my way into work. I'm aware that I look really tired. James is on nights at the moment. He's working on the surge hospitals, the surge tents that the hospitals are building for the dreaded C word, and he's working nights, and the dogs went berserk when he came in at Harper Street this morning. But yeah, in terms of reading, the advantage of James being on nights is that I got loads of reading done. So I read over 130 pages of The Gravity of Birds. It's not quite what I thought that it was. It's not a dual timeline. We have multiple timelines that we are following. So we have our early story in the 1960s where the two sisters meet this artist Thomas, and we know that something happens in that summer. We have a more present day timeline in the early 2000s where our artist Thomas is now a household name, and all his work has been catalogued and books have been written about him, and he's just revealed to someone that there is another painting that exists that nobody knew about. So an expert has been called in to come and look at that, and they have revealed that there are 2 panels missing from that painting, and so now there's a little bit of a search happening to identify those 2 panels. And then we've had a timeline in a part of the story in the 70s, so it's kind of like all over the place, but the point being that there is something that has happened in that summer, and we're slowly uncovering what it was. Little bit cliche in parts. So our very famous artist, after he revealed that there was this painting and there were these panels missing, we kind of did all of that, he's then had a stroke, so now he's unable to communicate what went on. So there's little things like that where I'm like, that's quite convenient. And it's also quite technical in its artistic wording, terminology. It's talking a lot about technical things to do with art and paint and things like that that are going a little bit over my head. But on the whole, I'm enjoying it. I'm intrigued to see what it is that is going to kind of emerge. We've already had a little bit of the 1970s timeline. We had a little bit of a thing between the artist and one of the sisters. I don't really want to say too much in case I spoil it for anyone who wants to pick it up. So yeah, there's multi layers. But right now I'm heading into work. I'm going to listen to a little bit of it on audio because I have a 25-minute drive in to work, so I'm going to listen to a little bit of it, and then yeah, I will update you all later on. So I'm actually quite a bit further on than I was in the last clip. I'm just over 3/4 of the way through, and this is going to be a really difficult book to talk about in too much detail without giving any major spoilers away, which I'm hesitant to do because I think that a lot of you would really enjoy this book. It's very readable, very entertaining. I have listened partly to the audiobook and I've partly read the physical copy, and the audiobook is brilliant. It has definitely given the book life, which I don't think that it would have if I just read the physical copy. So yeah, really enjoying it. My issue is, as I say, I'm 3/4 of the way through, and I think that I have worked out what is going on. I think in the last clip I mentioned we have our 2 sisters, Natalie and Alice, who meet this painter Thomas in the 60s, and something goes on. We also are following 2 other characters. We have Professor Finch and a guy called Stephen. Professor Finch is a professor of art, and he has basically written a book and studied all of the works of Thomas, and he's something of an expert on him and kind of a friend to Thomas, but not really, sort of looks after him and makes sure that he looks after himself, that kind of thing. And then by contrast, Stephen is this really chaotic character who has had this major fall from grace after a faux pas, and basically is hanging on to everything by a thread, but is very learned and very knowledgeable about art and about antiques, and has been tasked with authenticating this painting of Thomas's and saying, yeah, basically it was him that did it. But together they are trying to find the sisters to find these missing panels, so we get a little bit of insight into them as well as following the sisters. So as readers, we know what has happened to the sisters, but Finch and Stephen obviously don't know, and so we're following these two timelines, and it's very entertaining. He is just a whole level of chaos out there on his own. But yeah, as I say, so they're looking for these missing panels, and then the sisters disappear in the 70s. They just drop out of all records, and so there's a hunt. But obviously, as I say, we know what has happened to them, and there is a lot that goes on, and a lot of heartbreak and a lot of hurt, and it seems like everything is down to the older sister Natalie and her jealousy of the younger sister, and that's what's making me think I'll be really deflated if that's what it turns out to be, because because of some of the things that go on, it just doesn't seem like a significant enough reason. And I know that people can be petty, and I know that when people are hurt they can behave in ways that, like, logically, if they were detached and looking in at the situation, they would say that's not acceptable. I get that, but it just doesn't seem like enough for the level that has gone on in this book. And I really can't say any more than that without major spoilers. So yeah, I don't know, I'm kind of like now flying through it because I want to see whether I'm right or not, and I want to know what is going to happen, and I'm aware there might be a bombshell about to be dropped which will leave my jaw on the ground. We shall see. But yeah, in terms of like its readability and its interest levels and its pacing, that is all really good. I'm just now not sure about the actual content of the story, depending what happens in the last quarter. As I say, it could all be literally about to be turned upside down on its head and I will be singing a different tune. Yeah, so it's Friday afternoon. I've just finished work for the day. Not really got anything else to do. Probably pour myself a glass of wine and try and get this finished. James and Eli have actually gone for a swimming with sharks experience today. They went in about an hour and a half ago, so I'm eagerly waiting to hear back from them, and I hope they had a really good time. Also a little bit anxious about the outcome of it, but yeah, looking forward to hearing from them. But I haven't got anything else to do. I haven't got to do the school run because Eli is with James, so gonna get my reading on, and hopefully I'll be back here gushing about how incredible the ending of this book was. But there's a bit of a question mark there. We'll just have to pretend that there's no mess happening behind me. I'm technically working from home today, but I wanted to film this clip before I forgot, basically, because I have now finished The Gravity of Birds. I think that I would give it 3.5, 3.75 stars. I did enjoy it. However, it was essentially what I thought, which is that everything circles around this one character's jealousy and bitterness, and it was sold to us as we all make mistakes and sometimes we make poor errors in judgment and then we don't know how to undo those, but quite a lot of things happen because of this one poor decision. And actually it wasn't just one poor decision, it was several poor decisions that were allowed to snowball, and the level of deceit was quite high. So I was a little bit like, do I believe that that could happen? Do I buy into it? I'm not sure. But I did enjoy the way that it was all wrapped up and explained, and there were a couple of little surprises at the end which I didn't see coming either. So on the whole, definitely enjoyed it. It fulfilled the brief. There were birds running all the way through, so in terms of the theme, it definitely fits with that, and yeah, I enjoyed it. And on to the next one. Good morning. I am just about to head out to work, but I wanted to really quickly update you before I forgot that I have now started The Yellow Bird Sings. A reminder, this is World War II historical fiction. We are following a mother and a daughter who are Polish Jews, and they have been forced to flee their home, and they go to hide in the barn of a neighbour. It is an incredibly quick read. I only started it yesterday and I am already over 140 pages in. The chapters are very short. We're reading from both the point of view of the mother and also of the daughter. Possibly it's a little bit to its detriment in that we don't have the level of depth that I would necessarily want. We are skipping through the story at quite a rapid pace and we're not really getting too much depth. So we know some of the situation, we discover some of the situation, what forced the mother and daughter to have to flee, what happened to the rest of their family, that kind of thing, but we're just kind of told it in quite a matter-of-fact way. And I guess I would rather be shown it than just told it. I don't know. It's still very enjoyable. It's very readable. At the point that I'm at now, the mother and daughter have been hiding out in the barn for over a year, and they basically can't stay there. It's just not safe for anybody. So the mother is having to make the decision whether to separate from her daughter and send her daughter to hide in a nunnery, a convent. And the family that are hiding them have the connections to do that, so she has to make the decision of whether that's what she's going to do. And honestly, that's probably, of all that I've read so far, that's the hardest, because it's possibly closest to the bone for me. I could identify with the concern and the worry and the fear that the mother has to separate from her child, because while her child is with her, she feels like she can keep her safe. She has to send her away. Obviously she has no control then over what on earth is going to happen to her daughter, and she won't even necessarily know what is going to happen to her daughter, even if she gets to the convent and is then safe or anything like that. So it just is a horrendous situation to be in, but where they are at the moment isn't safe either. So yeah, really, really difficult, really, really tough, and we're just at the point where she's just made the decision. So yeah, that's where I am so far, enjoying it. It's based on a number of true stories. I think it's not based on one particular story, but this is a situation that many families sadly found themselves in during the World Wars. So I'm gonna go to work now. I'm going to pick this up later. I do have the audiobook, so I might try and listen to some on my drive, which actually might help with some of the pronunciations. I can't even say that word. Some of the pronunciations of the names, because obviously them being Polish, I'm not sure that I'm reading them correctly. So that is where I'm up to. I was going to open this with a look a little bit more put together than I did in the last clip, but having just got back from a very long day at work, I'm not sure that that is correct. But I wanted to come on and do an update because I have now started the Magpie Society, and this again is a really quick read. I started it yesterday evening. As I said, I've just got back from work. I am doing a blend of physically reading and listening to the audiobook like I did with the Yellow Bird Sings, but I am already 100 pages in, and the book is only just over 300 pages long, so yeah, flying through this one as well. I don't think that I explained what this one is about. So it has dark academia vibes with a murder mystery at the heart of it. We are following two students, Ivy and Audrey. They are both in the first year of sixth form, I think I'm right in saying, and they attend a private school called Illumin Hall. So Ivy is British. She is being portrayed quite stereotypically as quite straight-laced, quite uptight, just wants to focus on her education. Audrey is a new American transfer student for the start of the school year, which is when we start this book, and she is running away from something in her past, something that happened with her previous friend group in her previous school. We've been teased a little bit with it, but we don't know what it is, and she has come to Illumin Hall for a fresh start, and Ivy and Audrey are roommates. As I say, the book begins at the start of a new school year, and we find out that at the end of the last school year, at an end of term beach party, a very well-liked student called Lola was sadly found dead on the beach, and her death was determined by the police to be death by misadventure. Start of this term, a podcast link is sent to all the students, which basically says, "I know who killed Lola," thereby insinuating that it was murder and not death by misadventure. And so Audrey and Ivy, I think, are going to be thrown together. They are roommates. At the start of the book they're not really getting on, but I think the kind of the reveal of what is actually going on is going to force them together. There are lots of different things that we are being teased with. There are a few strange school traditions. There was a reference made by one of the students to Audrey when she was kind of showing her round about the magpies, and oh, you don't want to offend the magpies. Obviously the book is called the Magpie Society, so I think there's going to be some kind of darker, deeper thing happening potentially. But yeah, it's very, very readable. I'm flying through it. The audiobook is really good, very, very easy to listen to. Enjoying it so far. As I say, a little bit stereotypical. Ivy very uptight, very straight-laced. Audrey very bubbly, very friendly, wants to be, you know, friends with everybody, goes out of her way to kind of be outgoing. So a little bit stereotypical from the two characters, but enjoying it so far. So yeah, we will see. Literally started listening to the end of a chapter that I was halfway through listening to on the way home, and the head teacher has just blatantly blackmailed Ivy to try and find out who is making the podcast and then report back to her. Blatant blackmail by the head teacher. I've retreated upstairs and I'm also wearing a really wrinkled jumper. I have read another 60 pages now of the book, and as I said before, it's really readable. The fact that in the last hour I have read just under 60 pages tells you everything. But I do have to say I have a bit of a pet peeve, and that is that every single chapter is ending on a cliffhanger. Because we're reading from the two different points of view, we tend to read, it tends to go like Ivy, then Audrey, then Ivy, then Audrey, but every single chapter ends on a cliffhanger, and it is just getting a little bit frustrating. So for example, let me find a couple that aren't like big spoilers, because we've just found out something which I had kind of already suspected, and because I'd already suspected it and then it's transpired that that's what Ivy now thinks is happening, I'm going to say that it isn't the case. But anyway, back to my original point. So it seems like the harder I try to run from this mystery, the harder it tries to find me. End of one chapter. And then the chapter before that, if this is what the rest of the school year is going to be like, I'm going to be in for a lot of trouble. That's what it's like at the end of every single chapter, and it's just getting a little bit tiresome. Like, it feels like that's just a device in order to try and push the plot forwards almost. I don't know. It just is noticeable and it's a little bit annoying. But as I say, I'm now 2/3 of the way through, almost 2/3 of the way through, and yeah, still enjoying it, still wondering what's going on. Had a little bit more information about who the Magpie Society are, how it might be connected to the girl who died, Lola. Yeah, just gradually uncovering everything, but wanted to come on and say it just does have a tendency to veer towards the over-dramatic with the chapter endings.
And she didn't seem to have a long-term boyfriend at the time of her death.
Just wanted to do a quick update. I'm on a break from some training at work, so I have now finished the Magpie Society. This was another really quick read. I feel like as soon as I filmed and told you I was reading it, I have now finished it. So yeah, very entertaining. This is what I would call a solid 3.5 star read. It was entertaining. It wasn't anything mind-blowing or life-altering or earth-shattering. It was just a solid mystery. My main peeve with it is that the actual murder mystery that is presented to us in this book isn't actually resolved at the end. You have to read the next book in order to find out. There are no answers given to you at the end of this book. I have lots of theories but no actual answers, and another element is introduced right at the end. It sort of ends on a cliffhanger, so you don't get any resolution from the original mystery, and then there's another added mystery thrown in at the end, which almost forces you as a reader to have to pick up book 2, which is a little bit of a peeve. I wouldn't have minded if they'd resolved the first element and then thrown the cliffhanger in at the end and made you want to go ahead and read the second book, but to just give you absolutely no resolution whatsoever. Yeah, I feel a little bit shortchanged, I'm going to be honest. But yeah, just very entertaining, a little bit tropey, a little bit predictable, but on the whole, a thoroughly easy to read book. And as I say, I flew through it. So now I'm on to the final book, which is Birdsong, but I'm on half an hour's lunch break from some training, so I'm going to go and have my lunch, and I'll try and start Birdsong this afternoon, and I imagine that it's going to take me somewhat longer than the last 2 books have. So I have started Birdsong. I'm not too far in, I'm only 40 pages. I read a little bit last night and then I listened to some of the audiobook on my way to and from work today. I'm gonna be honest, I'm feeling a little bit underwhelmed at the moment. I knew that it started a little bit before the outbreak of the First World War, but I don't think that I had expected there to be such a gap or so much happening that feels a little bit irrelevant to the story. I thought it was a World War story, and I'm not entirely sure that it is. I think it's more to do with our young man Stephen that we're following. I don't know. As I say, I'm not very far in, and at the moment I feel like it's using a lot of words and it's saying a lot of things, but I'm not super interested in what any of those things are, which sounds awful, and I do feel like I'm potentially doing an injustice to the book, because I've heard some really good things about it. But so far we've met our young man Stephen. He is 20. He has gone to stay with a family in Amiens. I think their two families are going to do business together. There's some kind of weird dynamic with the wife in the family that he has gone to stay with, between the wife and the husband, and then between the wife and Stephen. We're sort of getting hints that something is going to go on. I don't know if they're going to end up having an affair or something like that. It's giving me those types of vibes. But as I say, a lot of talking, a lot of flowery language, but I'm a little bit bored by what's gone on so far, and yeah, I don't really know what to say. I am obviously going to keep going. I've heard very good things about the book. I would really love to love this book. I obviously thought it was going to be the book that I would enjoy the most, but at the moment I'm just feeling a bit meh about my reading experience. I've got to take Eli to football tonight, and that gives me a solid hour to just sit and read in the peace and quiet, so I'm going to do that. As I say, I did listen to some of the audiobook, and usually when I'm not connecting immediately with a book, listening to the audiobook often helps me immensely, but actually I found it even more difficult, and I found myself skipping back and having to re-listen to large sections because I had just completely zoned out. So maybe I'm not in the right headspace, I don't know. I'll give it a go. I'll keep going. I'll do some more reading this evening, and yeah, we will see. I'll be really disappointed if I don't like it, because I was really expecting to, and I was hoping that this would be what I thought The Yellow Bird Sings needed to be, which is much more character driven and much more on the level of like emotional damage. For those who asked for more cooking content from me, was there any of you? I am today making a sausage casserole. I'm laughing because I'm not considered the cook in this house. I make very standard boring meals. James is definitely a better cook than me, but he's not often here to cook, so it falls to me to do it. So yeah, I'm making sausage casserole today. But in terms of reading, I am now quite a bit further on in Birdsong. I am 287 pages in, and we have had various timelines since the book began. So we started with our 1910 timeline following our main character Stephen. That was the timeline that I really did not enjoy, and other than giving us some context for some later decisions, also don't understand why we had to have such a long section that I ultimately found incredibly boring. If I was the type of person who DNF'd books, I definitely wouldn't have carried on with it. I just really didn't engage with it at all. We have then gone to a World War I timeline, which was incredibly harrowing, really difficult to read, but I engaged with it a lot more. We follow Stephen from our 1910 timeline, but we also follow a number of other characters, and yeah, just some of the things I was reading about just so awful. And then we flashed forward to a timeline in the 1970s. We're following a young girl who, well, she's not young, she's 30. She's not young, she's 38, I was going to say, given that I'm 35 this year. Let me unpick that. A woman who is 38, who is kind of, she's not necessarily made great decisions, and she's now suddenly very interested in her ancestry, and one of her, I think it's her granddad or her great-granddad, is Stephen from the first timeline. So she is now looking back at him, looking back at his history, where he came from, that kind of thing, following his path. And then we have just gone back to a 1917 timeline where we're picking up with some of our First World War characters. So I'm enjoying it and engaging with it a lot more than I did with the first timeline, and as I said, I've not got that much really left to read. So yeah, looking forward to finding out what happens next. I'm sure all our timelines are going to kind of converge and have some kind of meaning, I hope. Otherwise I really don't know what the point of the 1910 storyline was. So I have now finished Birdsong by Sebastian Faulks. I'm sorry about the really poor lighting, it is miserable outside. Before I talk about this, I was looking back at my footage for some of the other books that I have read, and I didn't really feel like I did the Yellow Bird Sings justice. In the clip that I have, I just don't really say very much at all, so I just quickly want to revisit my experience of reading this. So it was a very quick reading experience. I think that kind of came across, that I felt like we were skipping quite quickly through the story, and ultimately I would say that that was my overall thoughts are that what it did well, in that it shines a light on an experience that many families had during the war, this displacement, this awful situation where you have a mother who has to send her daughter to what she hopes is safety, but she really has no concept of whether her daughter will get to the orphanage, whether she'll be safe there, and then once the war has finished, how these families then found each other again. There had been name changes, there had been location changes, you know, the displacement and the disruption was huge. And I enjoyed the author's note at the end where she talks about her inspiration for the story and how there are museums who to this day have exhibitions with photos up and, you know, questions like, are you my family? And it's not a statement, it's like a literal question. Are you my family? Do you know my family? Do you know what happened to my family? Because so many people just didn't. And yeah, so I enjoyed it from that point of view, but I wanted so much more depth, and I wanted to feel emotionally connected to the characters. I think that it was really lacking in terms of that, and I think that it's such an emotive topic, this idea of families being separated and wrenched apart and then trying to find each other again. I think it's such an emotive topic that the author could have exploited it and done so much more with it, whereas this is just a very surface level look at this topic. And whilst it is good at what it does, and I think that some people would enjoy that, for me, I wanted to be a little bit more emotionally damaged by my reading experience of it. I really wanted that deep connection with the characters and to feel what they were feeling and to feel their anguish and their desperation and all of that. I love stories like that, and I love books where the characters make you feel those things, and I just didn't get that with this. So I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was a solid read. I wouldn't say it was a favourite. I would definitely be interested in finding other books on this topic that maybe explore it with a little bit more depth. But yeah, that's my overall thoughts on that one. In terms of Birdsong, so you will know from previous clips that I wasn't massively enthusiastic about the story, but by the end of this book, oh my goodness, a completely different reading experience. I still don't think that the 1910 timeline it needed to be as long and waffly as it was. But I can see why the author put it in, and he certainly brought all our different timelines together in quite a satisfactory way. But yeah, just in terms of the way that I don't think, in all the times that I've read World War historical fiction, I don't think that I have ever read a book where we actually got the experiences of the men in the trenches and on the front line, and that is what this book captures so incredibly well. It is utterly heart-wrenching and heartbreaking to read of the experiences of these men and how it impacted them. Our main character Stephen, the emotions and the transformation that he goes through as a person because of what he has to do and what he experiences, and it really examines the extent that we will go to as human beings, and yeah, just the levels of violence and depravity that we can be capable of, that we maybe don't acknowledge that we're capable of. And yeah, just utterly heartbreaking. And I don't think that I've ever read a book where that is the main topic. It's often, World War fiction that I've read has often been about the women who were left behind, and quite rightly their stories need to be told, but it was just a different reading experience for me, and I really appreciated the timelines that we read that were set during the time of the First World War. I thought that the author did a really good job. It was a very visceral and raw reading experience, and I actually cried at several points. It was fantastically explored. That is Pepper barking in the background, sorry about that. So yeah, I overall really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. As I say, I think it could have done without that initial timeline. I know why it was in there, but I feel like it could have been shorter. So that is it really in terms of, let me just grab the other 2. I have now finished the 4 books. So just to remind you, we have Birdsong, which I've just talked about, The Yellow Bird Sings, Gravity of Birds, and The Magpie Society. In terms of my ratings, I think I was pretty much on with it, although I enjoyed The Gravity of Birds much more than I thought that I would. The Magpie Society I thought was incredibly entertaining, but I didn't like the way that the authors have pretty much forced us as readers to have to pick up the next book in order to get resolution. So that one probably sits at the bottom for me. And then we have The Gravity of Birds, then we have The Yellow Bird Sings, and then we have Birdsong. So there you go. I have now ticked off 4 of the books on my mammoth TBR, which you can see looming behind me, and yeah, a little bit of a mixed reading experience. I hope that if you have any of these books on your TBR, or if you are interested in reading any of them, that I have piqued your interest. I would certainly recommend Birdsong, but perhaps not if you're not a fan of flowery writing. It might not be for you, but I would definitely recommend Birdsong, The Gravity of Birds, yes, and The Magpie Society if you're in the mood for having to read a duology or a series. But yeah, that is that ticked off and done. So thank you very much for watching. If you have any suggestions on challenges or themes that I can apply to this video series, then do let me know. But as always, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you are all keeping safe and well. Take care, and I'll see you soon.